Here's a guy who thinks that you need to have an immaterial soul in order to know the truth about anything.
In his evolutionary argument against naturalism, Alvin Plantinga argues that believing in both naturalism and evolution together is ultimately self-defeating. The combination of these beliefs calls into question your own reasoning. Even Charles Darwin himself expressed doubts about whether a mind shaped purely for survival could be trusted for truth. He wrote, "With me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy."
Well, why would a soul, which, if I have one, is also clearly fallible, be any more trustworthy? Plantinga argues that there's a better chance of discerning the truth with a mind created by a loving God than a cognitive system formed by evolution. But given that our minds are fallible either way, how exactly do you calculate that a God-given fallible mind is more likely to reach the truth than an evolved fallible mind?
The idea is that if both naturalism and evolution are true, then we have little reason to trust the reliability of our cognitive faculties, and therefore little reason to trust that the beliefs formed by those faculties, including belief in naturalism and evolution, are true.
But given that our minds are fallible either way, we will always have reason to doubt our beliefs, even if they are derived by divinely granted minds.
Let's break the argument down and explain how exactly that follows. Naturalism is the belief that there is no God or supernatural influence, only cold, blind natural forces at work. Evolution is a process that favors traits that help organisms survive and reproduce. Evolution doesn't care if our beliefs accurately reflect reality. It only cares if those beliefs help us survive and pass on our genes.
And if there's a God, he clearly doesn't care very much about our ability to discern truth, because if he did, he would have made our minds infallible. He didn't. Clearly, it isn't that important to him for us to be able to discern the truth. Often apologists will blame human shortcomings on the fall, but we clearly had fallible minds before the fall, because if we didn't, Adam and Eve would not have made the mistake of eating the fruit they were told not to eat. In fact, they wouldn't have even needed to be told not to eat it. If God gave us minds for the purpose of discerning truth, why are we so bad at discerning truth?
Imagine a squirrel that sees a nut and believes that burying it will bring good luck for the mating season. This is obviously a false belief, but because burying nuts helps the squirrel store food, it still leads to adaptive behavior. The squirrel's chances of survival are boosted because it stored enough food for the harsh winter months. In this case, the squirrel's survival doesn't depend on having a true belief about the nut. It only depends on behavior that enhances its chances of survival. And if the outcome is, in fact, adaptive behavior, then evolution couldn't care less about the truth or falsity of the beliefs associated with it. But let's go a bit deeper into the exact role naturalism plays in this argument. A naturalist is likely to adopt materialism, the view that everything, including thoughts and beliefs, is ultimately physical or fully determined by physical processes.
A naturalist who believed that would have to be at least somewhat ignorant of how physical processes work, because whether the supernatural exists or not, it is not the case that every event is determined by physical processes, because not every event is determined at all. There are events which have at least some degree of causeless spontaneity.
So let's examine the two main branches of materialism, reductive and non-reductive, and how they relate to this argument. For the non-reductive materialist, beliefs depend on physical brain states, but they also have something extra, a kind of meaning or content that goes beyond just the physical processes. On this view, beliefs have two layers. There are neurophysiological properties, or NP properties for short, and these refer to the physical brain processes that make the belief possible.
If they make the belief possible, then it would be impossible for a non-physical soul to hold any belief, wouldn't it?
Including things like neurons firing and brain chemicals reacting. NP properties are the brain's physical side of holding a belief. Then there are content properties, and these are the meanings or ideas behind a belief, like thinking the sky is blue or there's a lion outside. This is what you consciously think or imagine when you hold a belief. Now here's where the issue comes in. If evolution has shaped our minds for no other reason than to direct us towards survival and reproductive capacity, then it would obviously prioritize the physical side of things, our behavior. It would be concerned with how we physically react to our surroundings and whether it promotes survival. And on materialism, that would be the function of our NP properties, the brain processes that drive survival-friendly behaviors. Evolution doesn't care if the content of our beliefs is true. It's basically blind to the truth and falsity of our beliefs.
And if God exists, he doesn't seem to care very much either, because if he did, he would have made our minds infallible. It is because we are fallible that science doesn't really aim to discern the nature of noumenal, mind-independent reality. It aims to find ways of thinking about the world that consistently predict observation. It could be the case that all of our observations are misperceptions, but science doesn't really care as long as they are consistent misperceptions. Science doesn't try to see beyond what may be a collective, consistent illusion. It only tries to help us navigate that illusion. Even if our observations are all wrong, evolution and naturalism have been effective at helping us navigate our potentially illusory experiences in ways that creationism and the supernatural simply do not.
And only cares that those NP properties lead us to act in ways that help us survive. Think of a hammer driving a nail into a piece of wood. Now, that hammer could have all kinds of qualities. Maybe it's engraved with a name, or it has a glossy finish, but it's not by virtue of those qualities that the nail is hammered into the piece of wood. What drives the nail is the weight and force of the hammer hitting it, not the name carved on the handle. Similarly, on non-reductive materialism, it's the physical properties, like the neurophysiological activity, doing the relevant survival work, not the extra content properties of the beliefs tied to them.
What reason do we have to believe that these content properties are not themselves physical phenomena?
Given this picture, someone who holds to both non-reductive materialism and evolution has serious reason to question whether this process is likely to lead to reliable cognitive faculties that produce mostly true beliefs.
And given the level of fallibility we have, regardless of whether God created us or not, we have reason to doubt that most of our beliefs are true either way. That's why I think trying to discern truth in the sense of ideas that match mind-independent reality is a fool's errand, whether there is a God or not.
If evolution only selects for survival-friendly behaviors, which are entirely determined by neurophysiological activity and are indifferent to the veracity of the content of an organism's belief, then someone who believes that this is indeed how their cognitive faculties were shaped should at the very least be completely agnostic as to whether they have any true beliefs at all.
And given how fallible we are, even if our minds were created by a God, we should be just as agnostic about whether we have any true beliefs at all.
Even if the content of beliefs did affect behavior, which the non-reductive materialist would have a hard time justifying, the truth or falsity of such content would still not matter at all, because we know that false beliefs can lead to adaptive behavior. But more on this point a little bit later. Now let's look at reductive materialism. This view can be a bit difficult to wrap your head around, but it basically says that contents of your beliefs are identical to your physical brain states, meaning each belief is just neurons firing and brain chemicals reacting. There's no extra layer to a belief beyond the physical processes in the brain. As weird as it sounds, the content of your beliefs, like the sky is blue, for example, just is the neurophysiological properties.
I wouldn't say properties, I would say processes. When we look at the sky, the light from the sky interacts with our brain in such a way as to cause it to undergo the perception that it is what we call blue.
But since the contents of beliefs are reduced to certain brain states, and these brain states are what causes behavior, then it follows that the contents of your beliefs directly cause behavior for the reductive materialist. But as mentioned earlier, evolution still doesn't care for these beliefs to be true. It only cares for them to lead to adaptive behavior.
And God clearly doesn't care very much about whether our beliefs are true, because if he did, he would have made us infallible.
A belief can be completely false as long as it results in behavior that increases our chances of survival. Take our earlier example with the squirrel, where its false belief was still useful. It led the squirrel to store food, which increased its chances of survival. In the same way, under reductive materialism, where the content properties of our beliefs are causally related to behavior by virtue of them being nothing but neurons firing in the head, evolution couldn't care less about the truth or falsity of those beliefs as long as they lead to adaptive behavior.
And if our decisions were not causally determined, our behavior would be random. We'd also have no more reason to think that our beliefs are true. If our beliefs are determined by a causal interaction between reality and our brains, why would that be less likely to produce an accurate picture of reality than if our immaterial souls produce beliefs that are totally causally disconnected from reality?
But you might be asking yourself the following question: wouldn't true beliefs help us survive better than false ones? That's a very natural question because in our everyday experience, it seems obvious that true beliefs help us navigate the world effectively.
That would depend on what aspect of our experiences we're trying to navigate. There was a time, before we looked too closely at astronomy, that geocentrism was an entirely adequate model with respect to predicting observation. If all you want to know is when and where the sun will rise and set, geocentrism as a model of the cosmos is perfectly effective. It's only when you look at the planets and how they move around in the sky that geocentrism becomes inadequate relative to the efficacy and efficiency of heliocentrism. But so what? What's the point of being more concerned with whether a particular theory or model is true than whether it is useful for predicting observation? Even if the idea that the supernatural exists is true, it's useless, or at the very least, it's far less useful than naturalism. So what is to be gained by adopting it? Until we encounter observations that are more consistently, falsifiably, and parsimoniously predicted by the idea that the supernatural exists than the idea that it doesn't, I don't see the point of believing in the supernatural or the non-physical, even if they do exist. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.